Hi, this is Lucia with Another Way. We will continue with our exploration of the Course in Miracles in this beginning series of videos with Another Way. Even though in subsequent chapters we'll be talking about other topics and maybe other ideologies and other schools of thought. So let's continue with our description, definition, a little bit of study of what A Course in Miracles teaches. And one of the aspects that I'd like to get into at this point is the aspect of spirituality, the aspect of our religious beliefs, our ideas, our thoughts of God, and the metaphysical. Metaphysical comes from meta, which is beyond, so beyond the physical. So the aspects of our life that pertain to that beyond the physical. In the Course, the word spirit is used to define that aspect of the self. So we are not bodies, we are spirit. And so we'll talk about spiritual or the Course in spiritual terms. And one of those bigger topics in our lives on the spiritual end of things is the concept of God. So the God of the Course is not anthropomorphic, so it's not the God of traditional, any of the Judeo-Christian religions or the Abrahamic religions. It is also not the aspect of mind of other religions like Buddhism. So the God of the Course is basically beyond our perceptual reality. So it's beyond our perception. However, God is not a belief, it's a fact. So, and I hate to call it, it's not an it. God cannot be defined, so we would be remiss to refer to God as Him, because the moment that you place gender on the infinite, then you box it in. You limit it. So to say that infinity is a him, that eternity is a she or an it immediately defeats the purpose. Now the Course then does not attempt to define God. In fact, it says that the Course does not attempt to teach love, which it equates with God, because that is something that cannot be taught. The only thing that we can be taught is to remove the blocks to its awareness. And then later on it talks about revelation and miracles, and it defines revelation as communication directly from God to you. So we cannot communicate upward to God because basically this me that you're seeing, this me that you experience in God's realm simply isn't there as an individual. And that's hard to grasp. However, the point of the teaching is that God is not only a changeless, all-encompassing perfection of love, but it cannot be damaged. It is perfect. And this always reminded me of a biblical statement where when Jesus was asked by the disciples, on what to do, and he just makes a statement saying, "Be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect." So we could think of God as this father, a fatherly figure in heaven. Our society is a patriarchal society, and we cannot refer to beings in a position of authority without having a male imagery attached to them, a male identity. So almost every religion in the world refers to the God authority or the Godhead as a male figure, except for some modern day schools like Wiccan, where they refer to a goddess. But either way, it's really wrong, because whenever you refer to God as a he or a she, you're limiting the infinite. And that's the whole point, is that God is changeless, perfection, timeless, not just eternal, because eternal implies some sense of time. but it's timeless. It's out of this world. It's out of time. God is out of space, so it's really outside of this reality. So wherever we are, wherever this pseudo reality is, it's not in the world of God. However, our goal is to remember God and reunite, or basically go back home. And another principle of the Course is that home in God has always been there, and we have never left it. So we are under the impression that we left. We are under the impression that we offended God by leaving, and we are under the impression that He holds a grudge against us, and we're also under the impression that He's out to get us, and that He will at some point meet us, and that we will meet with Him, and He will net out His punishment because we have failed Him. And this is all kind of a soap opera that we have made up, and all the different human myths or religions explain this concept through different myths, through different stories, and in the end they all come down to the same message, that there's perhaps not only a wrathful, authoritarian, anthropomorphic Godhead, God figure out to get us as a humanity, but in some others it even goes farther into making this God so vengeful, so cruel and unloving, that He would actually create a place where to send His children to hurt and suffer for all eternity because they did not do His will. So one of the things that I have found most, I would say, peace generating within the Course, most self-forgiving within the Course, and most for which I'm most grateful, is the fact that God, because of God's perfection, and I will refer to God as a He just simply because of our limitations in our own language. We only have dualistic languages as dualistic beings that we are kind of experiencing here. We can only conceive of God as a He, so I'll just refer to Him as a He for lack of a better word. Don't like calling Him an it. But God is perfect, and perfect love. So perfect love has no ego. So let's say that you do something to offend me. The reason I am offended is because I have an ego, because I think, how could you do this to me? And I have this overblown image of the self, and in a way it's actually a vulnerability. So when I feel that my vulnerability has been pricked, poked, prodded, hurt, damaged, injured, then I react. That's the way the human works. And that requires an ego to react to external events. Now take the opposite of that. Imagine yourself as an all-encompassing, self-fulfilling, self-sufficient, eternal, timeless, changeless, completely, perfectly happy, loving God or entity, or whatever word you want to use to identify this, that is unidentifiable, unnameable. But try to imagine yourself as that. And could you be offended if you know that there's nothing that can damage you? Could you be hurt if you know that there's nothing that can injure you? And all you're made of, your complete identity, your complete substance, is love. And it's love that is ever extending and ever expressing and ever expanding, and it feeds itself. That love is simply eternal and self-fulfilling, and it fulfills and it creates by extending itself and the more it gives, the more it pleases in giving, and the more it's joy, and the more it's completeness. If you are that, how could you be offended? How could you plot a murderous vengeance? How could you create a hell? How could you even create anything that was unlike you? How could you create anything that was not perfection? Now, also, if that is your only reality, anything that is not that is not within your realm of perception, if there was perception to be had. But again, if all there is you, there is no subject and object. There is no need for perception. So all that you would see is what you are, God. Now take us, small, separate, very self-concerned, and completely at war with that which we have just attempted to define and is undefinable. So, of course, we're going to see ourselves as persecuted because we're trying to measure our tiny, small self, which is our self-identity, against the all-encompassing. And we are at war with God. So we think we have left Him. We think that we have managed somehow to separate from the all-in-all, which cannot be damaged, fragmented, or broken, but we think we have. And as the parable of the prodigal son, the way the story goes, the son thinks that his father hates him because he actually left home and is terrified and afraid to go home. And he thinks that when he returns home, because he has run out of resources, that he's going to go home and he's going to have to work in his father's pig pens, and he's going to have to work with the servants because he's not worthy of returning home. And yet his surprise is tremendous when he returns home and the father welcomes him with open arms and orders the best calf to be killed for him, which was a symbolic way of really welcoming you home back then, is to give you your best, to kill the best calf. That was like the ultimate in celebration and a gift of welcoming. So how could the father be so joyful and so happy to see the son return if he was offended? So again, love cannot be offended. It cannot be hurt, cannot be damaged, cannot be diminished, cannot be decreased, cannot be sinned against. And that is the key. Sin is our concept. It's not a concept that God made up. And this is what kind of causes a little bit of rift between traditional Christians and then people who adopt the teachings of the Course in Miracles. Because yes, in the Course there is a Jesus, there is a God, there is the Holy Spirit, but there is no sin. The sin is a concept that we have invented. We have decided that there is such thing as sin, and it can be perpetrated against God, and then God comes out and provides, in retribution, your just punishment for whatever your sins are. And that's our philosophy. But again, love cannot even notice that, because love lives in its own perfection and its own eternal joy. So when we think about sin as something that is accomplishable, when I think that I have the power to affect God in such a way as to provoke His anger, then where is that concept coming from? Is that concept coming from a humble heart, from a humble mind, from a humble spirit? Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. That's what that's talking about. There's no meekness in assuming the power to damage the undamageable. There's no power in assuming that you can fragment what is unbreakable. There's no power in thinking that you can circumvent eternity by going to church and living some act of contrition. So all those assumptions that we make, that there is a sin, that I have the power to damage and hurt God, that comes from the ego. It comes from actually our side that loves being me, as we had discussed in previous chapters, in previous videos and episodes, is that we have the concept that I am God's gift to the earth. That's really our overblown ego, and everybody has that aspect to themselves until it's undone. But because it is so strong, we believe in it, we give it reality, and we practice its teaching. It is also our teacher, and it teaches hate, and it teaches separation. Now, some spiritual paths or traditions define that as Satan. They may call it Satan, the devil, etc. Well, in the Course, we call it the ego. So I'm just a little translation here, doing a little translation. So the ego will try to make you believe that you are more powerful than God. Therefore, you can sin against him and incur his wrath. And now you must do something to abate that wrath, to stop him from coming here to punish you. So the trick then is to take that hot potato of guilt and toss it around to others. So the Course calls that, in use of the Freudian psychology, projection. So this projection of your own guilt and your own fear of God becomes your own boomerang, right? And so you throw it out there, and it eventually reciprocates. But you throw it out there, and you begin to see this guilt and many other people, and that justifies your actions. So yes, I can defeat God, but if he comes after me, they did it. And we begin to point the finger at the other person. You did it, he did it, she did it. It's them, right? It's the, whoever they are. If you're Christians, it's the Muslims. If you're Muslims, it's the Christians. If you're Arabs, it's the Jews. If you're Jews, it's the Arabs. If you're Democrats, is the Republicans. If you're Republican, is the Democrats. If your brother and his sister, then it's the brother, it's the sister that did it. If your friends, is my friend that did it, I didn't do it. If it's your country, my country didn't do it, it's their country. It's always someone else outside of you who is to blame for your current and present circumstances. So then we come up with the world of guilt out there, of evil, and we experience a world of war, and a war of famine, and a war of disaster. And the more our fear of God increases, the more we project that fear, and the more we want to see that guilt out there, and then we see this world becoming more and more angry, violent, reactionary, and more than anything, unloving. Something to think about. God is love, and to honor God is to realize that you do not have the power to damage him. You do not have the power to sin against him. You only have the power to not sin. You only have the power to be like him. You only have the power to remember who you are. Thank you for joining us.